Mario Kart 8 Deluxe is one of the most complete versions of Mario Kart. If you were going to play Mario Kart at a party, you would invite me, and you'd likely be playing 8 Deluxe unless you had a Wii. And Nintendo knew this, as they've been running with Mario Kart 8 since the Wii U in 2014, over 8 years ago. However, it's slowly aging, and to combat this, Nintendo released a DLC, the Booster Course Pass, doubling the amount of tracks in the game, and therefore doubling the content, right? Right? I personally haven't bought the DLC, and I don't plan to. This isn't just because of the fact that I can play all the tracks online anyway, but because I personally don't like the DLC that much. And today, I'm going to be talking about exactly why. However, before I start, I do want to mention that this is all just my opinion, and if you like the DLC, that is perfectly fine. You're allowed to think what you think, and so am I, and anyone else who shares my opinions. Of course, have your opinions, just don't get mad or try to force them onto me. Anyways, let's get on with the video. For this video, I'm going to be picking apart every Wave 1 and 2 track individually, stating what I like and dislike on them. And don't get me wrong, I don't hate every track. And this is apparent with the first track in the DLC, Paris Promenade. Promenade? I don't give a fuck. Now I'll be honest, I am not a fan of tour tracks in the slightest. I think they're all complex to play on at first, and none of them are particularly interesting to play. But one of the least of these is definitely Paris Promenade. I think it's a solid track, although I'd much rather any other track had taken its place. It's cool that you go backwards on the last lap, but to be honest, because the whole track feels very samey, it's not overly noticeable. Hell, I hadn't even noticed until I was told. It's a lot more noticeable in another track, which I will touch on later. Overall, I'll give it a 5 out of 10. Not great, but better than most of the other tour tracks. Toad Circuit is the next track that was added in the DLC, and it's fine. It's a very boring choice for a track, and if they wanted a basic circuit to be in the game, Wii Daisy Circuit, GCN Luigi Circuit, or hell, even 3DS Mario Circuit would have probably been a lot more interesting. Toad Circuit isn't the worst circuit in the game, and at least they added this over a GBA Circuit, which would have ended up using the horrible music from GBA Mario Circuit in the base game. Toad Circuit, however, heavily displays a big issue with the DLC tracks. They all take their layouts and textures from Mario Kart Tour. The texture work is fine in Tour, as it's a mobile game, being run on systems that are much less powerful compared to the Switch. The Switch is a lot more powerful and can handle better models and textures. Hell, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe has tracks as stunning as N64 Rainbow Road, Wario's Gold Mine, Mute City and Tick-Tock Clock. So to go from tracks with such incredible visuals and then start playing on this, it's no competition. The base game tracks are just better looking. Why anyone would want to play on Toad Circuit over Mario Kart Stadium, when Mario Kart Stadium not only plays better, but also looks incredible? I couldn't tell you. Overall, I give it a 2 out of 10. It could have been fine, but it was never going to rank high. Choco Mountain also suffers from the same issue, and while Choco Mountain has been improved visually, something about it just doesn't have the same charm as the original, or even the DS remake. I don't know if it's the cave, or the glider section, or just how different it is. This might just be me, but I don't think having overly big changes to this track made it better. Of course, I don't hate it, I just prefer the original much more, but I'll give it a 5 out of 10. It's alright. Coconut Mall is... right, this is something else entirely. Coconut Mall was a retro track from Mario Kart 7. As far as I'm aware, we've never seen a case of a track coming back as a retro track 2 games in a row prior to this DLC. Actually no, tell a lie, SNES Rainbow Road was the first case of this. This isn't an anomaly in the DLC either. A lot of the tracks coming back were retros in 7. Considering this was the game prior to Mario Kart 8, they could have definitely left it out in place for another track that has never come back as a retro track, like Wario Colosseum or Toad's Factory. But I guess since this track was overrated as hell, it was a good way to secure sales on the DLC, so I guess it made sense to bring back. But how well did they do it? Well, they didn't. Coconut Mall was absolutely butchered in the remake. Not only does it have the same issues of using its model from Tour, it also has so many details that I don't like at all. For starters, the escalators were replaced with these conveyor belts. You know, instead of the escalators that would have made sense to be in a mall. The mall also feels very empty in comparison. The shops feel like they lack life, and considering that tracks like Mario Kart Stadium and Yoshi Circuit added so much life to the tracks, I can't help but feel slightly disappointed when Coconut Mall is so empty. They also appear to have fixed up the track, adding fully constructed turns instead of the metal that was in the original. While I get why it was done, and I get why someone would like it, it removes the charm that Coconut Mall had in the first place, just like Choco Mountain. Although the pixel art is kinda cool, I like the glider ramp and the cars in the yard which have Shy Guy. Right, I love Shy Guy, but actually, I'm not too bothered by the lack of Miis. It was clear on the Switch that Miis played a much lesser role, and it's understandable that the Miis wouldn't be driving in these cars. Hell, I wouldn't be surprised if Miis didn't return for the next Nintendo console. And now that the cars move, I really don't mind this. It's the other changes that make it bad. While it for sure boosted the sales of the DLC, I can't see why everyone rushes to choose this track over something like Wario Stadium. 3 out of 10. It would have ranked worse, but at the very least, it's still Coconut Mall. The next track is the second tour track in the DLC, Tokyo Blur. Okay, right off the bat, I'm disappointed. A lot of the tour tracks have alliteration in their names. Paris Promenade, Los Angeles Laps, Sydney Sprint, but Tokyo Blur? Really? And I think this is the Japan track. Tokyo Blur is probably one of the most forgettable tracks in the game. It does very little. It is extremely linear, provides little to no exploration, and it's just boring to play on. I wish I could say more, but there's so little to talk about with this track that it's hard to find anything interesting to say. I mean, hell, there is one singular shortcut in this entire track. The rest of your gameplay is down to taking tight turns. It's dull, forgettable, I'm not a fan. 1 out of 10. It exists, and I don't like it. After that mess though, we have the first track that has never returned as a retro track before until now. Shroomridge is one of my favourite DS tracks, and it is... fuck, it's shit, isn't it? Once again, it has tour graphics. This is just extremely disappointing, especially seeing how good tracks like Toad's Turnpike and Yoshi's Circuit look. Not only that, but why are the cars going the same way? In the original, the cars drive on the left-hand side of the road, like how we do in the UK. But why are they going the same way? Why are they ignoring traffic laws? This isn't even a nitpick either. This straight up makes the track easier to play, and it's just not nearly as fun anymore. The additional shortcut and glider ramp are nice though, but not enough to save how boring this track is to play on Switch. 3 out of 10. It could have ranked a lot higher if it weren't for the weird traffic laws. Now you've heard me complain a lot in this video, but all of what I've just said is going to seem tame compared to the next track. This track is GBA Sky Garden. Sky Garden is my favourite GBA track. I love it in Super Circuit, and I really love it in DS. So when I heard that it was going to be in the DLC, I was hopeful. I was very interested to see what they would do with what the actual fuck is this. Now I've talked about tracks using their tour models before, which is something I can definitely look past, but not with Sky Garden. Why? Because this is not Sky Garden. The layout on this version is completely different. This was done because Mario Kart Tour couldn't make the sharp turns present in Sky Garden. Oh, but Boo Lake is fine. Not only that, the Mario Kart 8 Deluxe can make the sharp turns. So what gives? Why is it different? Not only that, but the track is ridiculously short now. Once again, because the layout was taken from Tour. And if all of that wasn't enough, the bright turquoise brick road was replaced with this bland, boring red brick road. This was different in Tour too, being a grey brick road. Why did they make this change? Like, if they insisted on this layout, why change the bricks to something worse than the grey? Like, I don't like the grey either, but why change it to red? This just makes things worse. The turquoise road was iconic. It gave Sky Garden the uniqueness and majestic atmosphere and charm that it had. The remake in Tour and 8 Deluxe is just bland, boring, and not Sky Garden. I'm even hesitant to call it Sky Garden 2. This also worries me a lot, thinking about the future. If Sky Garden were to come back in the future, would it keep this layout? Or would it return to the original layout? Maybe DS will permanently be the best variation of Sky Garden because of this change, and I hate it so much. 0 out of 10. I can't believe I've just said that about Sky Garden, but I did, and I'm not sorry about it. However, we now move on to one of the better tracks in the DLC. Ninja Hideaway is a track that I actually really enjoy playing on. It has an interesting layout, fun shortcuts, and hell, it doesn't look terrible. Granted, if it were in the main game, it would have looked 10 times better. I don't doubt that for a second. But this is the first track in the DLC that I'll happily call good, although I do not understand why this is an out of bounds section. And this turn can be really annoying sometimes, especially on 200cc. But overall, I like it. 8 out of 10. If these few issues I had with the track weren't as prominent, it could easily be a 9 or even a perfect 10 out of 10. I like it. And that wraps up wave 1 of the DLC. Overall, I'll rank this wave at 4 out of 10. While it established what the DLC was going to entail going forward, the fact that there's only one track that I can confidently say is good really hurts it. Especially as more waves come out, this wave was just heavily outclassed, and will likely continue to be. Wave 2 opens with a track, I guess. New York Minute is, it's lacking alliteration too. I will admit, the music in New York Minute is top tier. Something about it is just really nice to listen to. And today I learned you can't just Google New York Minute without finding a movie from 2004 and a song by Eagles. Anyways, while New York Minute doesn't have nearly as much linearity as Tokyo Blur, considering it has optional glider ramps and a few shortcuts, it's still not got much. I do like the references to Broadway and the red carpet on the final lap, but even with all of this, the only thing that boosts it is its music, not to mention the name, New York Minute. I guess any longer than a minute would be heinous and not allowed. Again, the lack of alliteration bugs me. Most of the tour tracks seem to have this naming scheme, so the ones that break it are gonna stand out. Maybe this is why I have such an issue with the track being called Music Park instead of Melody Motorway. I don't know, this track just feels stale. 4 out of 10. Would have been lower if it weren't for the music. The next track is... okay, is every second track in every wave going to be a basic bitch circuit? Although this one is miles worse than Toad Circuit. Mario Circuit 3, we really seeing this track again? For those of you who don't know, we have actually seen every single SNES Mario Circuit track in Super Mario Kart as a retro track. Mario Circuit 1 was in DS, Mario Circuit 2 was in 7, and Mario Circuit 3 was in Wii. But there is actually a Mario Circuit 4, which I don't know why I hyped up so much considering it's a SNES Mario Circuit. But my point is, why is it that we've seen every single Mario Circuit track, but not this one? Seriously. What is so good about Mario Circuit 3 that it warranted being in the DLC? Not only that, but it is the only SNES track that we've gotten so far. And as someone who really likes the SNES tracks, why this? Ghost Valley has only returned once, and there are 2 other variations of them. SNES Bowser Castle hasn't returned at all, and neither has Vanilla Lake. Although Vanilla Lake is shit, so fair enough. Choco Island 1 hasn't returned either, and neither has Cooper Beach 1. Okay, real talk here, what the hell is up with that? Mario Kart 7 added the ability to go underwater. It's a nice addition, and definitely adds some atmosphere to the game. And do you know how many retro tracks had underwater sections that made sense with the original tracks instead of being forced? I'll tell you. 4! Daisy Cruiser had this puddle, which is more of a quality of life thing than adding to the track at all. I mean, it had the engine room too, but I don't really like that because of how little it makes sense for a boat's engine room to be flooded. Donut Plains 3 has its small lake, which is fine. It's nice, don't get me wrong, but it's nothing major. GCN's Sherbetland is the best by far, adding a whole new track under the original. And Chi Chi Beach made it so driving through the water actually made sense, though it's debatable whether the underwater sections are new in this track. The other retros with underwater sections were either forced as hell, like Dry Dry Desert and Wario Stadium, or were from 7, like Piranha Plant Pipeway and DK Jungle. Cooper Beach 1 would be a perfect way to fix this. It could be probably one of the best SNES tracks in the entire game if it were added. So why was Mario Circuit 3 added? Considering, once again, we saw it in Wii already, as opposed to all of the other SNES tracks that we haven't seen before that are miles better. But ignoring this, Mario Circuit is fine, I guess, but I can't help but feel disappointed. 2 out of 10. This cup does redeem itself slightly with Calamari Desert. I'll admit, I think that Mario Kart 64's selection of tracks is a little bit wank, but it has some good tracks too, one of which being Calamari Desert. This track I actually think didn't get overly fucked by tour graphics. Don't get me wrong, it could look miles better, but it could also look like Toad Circuit or Shroomridge. The change in the track between laps is really well done, and while I'm not a fan of the red ramps visually, I think they serve their purpose well. I also like how the train is shorter, meaning you won't be stuck waiting for the train to pass, which is an issue I had with the original track and even the retro in 7. This is definitely one of my favourite tracks in the DLC, and while it was a retro in 7 also, I don't think it's as bad here considering the fact that it isn't as overrated as some of the other 7 retros. A good track overall that doesn't get boring. 8 out of 10. Could have definitely been a 10 out of 10, and likely would be if it were in the base game instead of the DLC. And the final track in the Turnip Cup is one of the most beloved tracks in Mario Kart overall. This track being Waluigi Pinball. This track was destined to be in the DLC, even if it was a retro track in 7. And while I think the Waluigi Pinball is heavily overrated, like, guys, chill out, there were better DS tracks. I still don't mind its inclusion. Considering the fact that Wario Stadium was in the base game, they didn't have to make a new remix for Waluigi Pinball, as they could just use the same song. And while I know some people were disappointed with it, I personally think it's fine. If anything, it was to be expected. Although all of my issues with the original track are all prominent here. This track is extremely linear, with no shortcuts and little to no dangers outside of the pinballs. When you get to the main pinball part of the track, at the very end, you're finally met with some danger though, seeing as the pinballs roll around here. It's fine, I guess, but I will say this, I do like how the track has unique sound effects, like the item roulette, the cannon, and the ending of the track. Oh, wait, what? It's not there? Hold up, let me just play the versions from DS and 7 for you. Notice anything? What's weird about this is that all the other unique sounds from Waluigi Pinball are present, so why is it that this sound was removed? This was a sound that I was looking for when this track came out, and God was I disappointed when this track didn't contain it. 5 out of 10. Even though I have a lot of gripes with this track, they were present in all other versions of this track, and at the very least, it is still Waluigi Pinball. Hot take though, Wario Stadium's better. The next track is once again another tour track. Sydney Sprint is... okay, this is some great music. Sydney Sprint isn't nearly as linear as the other tour tracks, especially when you get to the beach, so it's definitely a plus. It's got tour graphics, but to be honest, most of the tracks do, so I'll likely not mention it unless the track gets really fucked by it like Shroomridge did. I get why the linearity is a thing, considering tour controls like it does, but considering the fact that Mario Kart 8 is a different game, and retro tracks typically capitalise and change the track to fit the game they're brought back to, the tour tracks could definitely be less linear. Like, this could be a shortcut, but it's just not. But it's one of the better tour tracks, so I don't mind it. 5 out of 10. The next track that we got is our second track that we've never seen before as a retro. Snowland is honestly one of the worst GBA tracks, but it is really good in the DLC. I'm a sucker for the way the GBA tracks are revamped. Ribbon Road is probably my favourite retro track of all time, so I'm happy to see any GBA track in the DLC at all, even if it has tour graphics, as long as it doesn't do what Sky Garden did. And Snowland didn't do that. It got a base game revamp, which is really nice. It got one of the most unique shortcuts, which honestly feels like a Mario Kart Wii shortcut, so it's oddly nostalgic to me. It's a simple track, but somehow it stands out to me. Probably one of the best ice tracks in the series. 7 out of 10. Next up, we have yet another retro track from 7. Noticing a pattern? Mushroom Gorge is another track that... okay, this one is actually really overrated. I don't have a massive issue with it being present in the DLC, it's just... come on, Toad's Factory was right there! I can't help but feel disappointed that all of these overrated tracks were added over the tracks that I'll say are better, despite the fact that they were in the game just before Mario Kart 8. I don't know, it feels cheap. But as a track, Mushroom Gorge works well, although it was definitely better in Wii because of the way tricking works in Wii. It's better than it was in 7, don't get me wrong, and the gap cut is possible, which is nice. But I can't help but feel like this was a basic choice to boost sales over choosing a better track. Not only that, but this track got hit hard by tour graphics and I don't like it, especially the cave. 5 out of 10. Would have been lower if it weren't for the fact that it's still a good track to play. The final track in Wave 2 is actually a Nitro track, which is interesting. Sky High Sunday appears to be quite an interesting track, but I am not a fan. Looking at its layout, it really just looks like a glorified Excitebike arena, which is another track that I don't like. The track itself is fine to play, The theme is nice, but if you get shocked at all before the section, then say goodbye to your chances of first. It's straight up impossible to get past these floating platforms so small, and it is ridiculously cheap. For this being the first Nitro track, it is kind of disappointing. 2 out of 10. Would have been better if it wasn't just Excite Spike with extra steps, and Sweet Sweet Canyon is better. You know you fucked up when you're worse than a Mushroom Cup track. And that wraps up the second wave of the Booster Course Pass. Overall, I'll give it a 5 out of 10. It gets a slight edge over the first wave simply because most of the tracks are better than the first wave selection. Although there are a lot of issues that I have with the tracks, most being shit that I can't look past, like the lack of the iconic sound in Waluigi Pinball or the linearity of New York Minute. It's painfully mid, and that is basically as high as I feel I can rank it. And there we have it. There is my opinion on every track in Wave 1 and 2, and hopefully this highlights some of the reasons that I don't like the Mario Kart 8 Deluxe DLC. I'm not opposed to DLC as a concept, but a lot of the issues that I have are very prominent only in the DLC, so I wanted to talk about them. Of course, again, you're allowed to disagree, as long as you're nice about it. But if the DLC adds Rob as a playable character, then I'll happily buy it and shut up. What are your thoughts on the Mario Kart 8 Deluxe DLC? Love it or hate it? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Be sure to subscribe if you would like to see the later parts of this video. Also, leave a like if you enjoyed. It really helps me out more than you would think. And until next time, goodbye.